devotees sitting in Prabhupada. Om Gyantim Vista Gyanandana Salakaya Akshurundikandina Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Radha Shri Guru. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama Rama Hare Hare. Yesterday, we discussed that the mode of goodness was that mode which was most conducive to practice spiritual life. It's the basis of liberation. And today, we'll talk about how liberation is achieved. There are certain misconceptions as to the way by which one attains the transcendental platform. We'd like to talk about those today. And in yesterday's example, both by analyzing the symptoms of the modes of material nature, as well as by statements of Lord Krishna in Bhagavad Gita, Buddha Gita, and it was evident that the mode of goodness is that platform most conducive for spiritual life, whereas passion and ignorance are antipathetic to that. So one point I would like to start off with today is a really common phenomenon which I know I encounter, one from a philosophical point of view, but not only just from a philosophical, but from a point of view of practice, as to how that attitude that Vaishnavas exhibit. And this relates to the question of whether we are transcendental. In other words, whether a devotee, by dint of putting on clothing, putting on tilak, automatically becomes transcendental. I say that the experience is both philosophical, conceptual, and also behavioral. Behavioral is that devotees tend to think that if they are, or if someone is callous to his duty, unclean, we use this word spaced out, isn't really attentive, and sometimes we tend to call that type of person an avadhuta. Avadhuta is the most exalted position in spiritual life, and yet we call more or less what a pseudo-hippie is an avadhuta. Just because there's a fundamental misconception. We sometimes think that because Yudhisthira Maharaj was able to tell a lie, therefore we can lie because devotees are transcendental to all standards of morality, truth, and so on. Very often in terms of behavior, certain standard behavioral norms, we also tend to use the excuse, well, devotees are transcendental. And it may be a fact that devotees are transcendental. But the question is, who is the quote-unquote devotee that is transcendental? Someone give more Krishna. So, and then the philosophy philosophical point of view comes up, that yes, Prabhupada had said that the devotees are transcendental. In Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Mam cha yogam charina bhakti yogam sivati sadhanam samatitartan mamam. Yes, you're sadhana. If you're a devotee, then you're sadhana, you're above the gunas. So we should just analyze this verse and see what it actually means and what the implication is. Because there's a bit of a problem with this identification. If we can't actually distinguish between Krishna consciousness and non-Krishna consciousness, we've got really big problems, both individually and institutionally. So, even just from the hypothetical point of view, if we're actually not transcendental, but we think that we're transcendental, if we think that activities influenced by the modes of material nature are transcendental, then, well, first of all, our impetus for spiritual life is immediately going to stop. Not only that, but we're going to confuse material with spiritual. And from that will come sahajaism, materialism, mayavad, and so many other types of misconceptions. Therefore, Prabhupada says, first be conscious and then be Krishna conscious. Part of being conscious means let's actually know and be realistic about where we are, instead of trying to be idealistic and sort of jump on the transcendental bandwagon just because there's a certain terminology that facilitates that. Let's go to 1426, which is the oft-quoted verse. Translation is, one who engages in full devotional service, who does not fall down in any circumstance, at once transcends the modes of material nature and thus comes to the level of Brahman. Well, pretty good stuff. Sadhanan Samadhi at once transcend the modes of material nature. Alright, so devotees think, I'm practicing bhakti yoga, so I'm transcendental. In fact, when the question is put to Prabhupada, Prabhupada also said, devotees are above the modes. So, doesn't it stand to reason that we're also above the modes? Are we not therefore on the Brahman platform? So, what we should really see is, what are the minimum qualifications of someone who is a devotee above the modes? What are the qualifications? Let's start with, for instance, Krishna's definition here. Avyabhichari. What's avyabhichari mean? He says, a person who does not fall down in any circumstance. Sometimes we gloss over that. Person who doesn't fall down in any circumstance. I'm not breaking the regulated principles. Krishna says, don't fall down in any circumstance. That means you don't fall down from complete engagement all day long and day to day. Always fully engaged in Krishna's service, never succumb to influence of the minds or the modes of material nature. Does not fall down means you don't fall down in your motivation. The motivation is always pure. Pure motivation means to serve Krishna. One doesn't fall down to the platform of attachment and hankering within the mind. Yeah, externally I'm following the principles, but how about in here? How often are we breaking the principles? Lamentation, we want honor, fame, and distinction. That's also falling down. And what about the subtle fall down? Even if there's no gross, what about the gross fall down? That also one should be freed from. So one should be freed from all of these things. It means that someone is really pure in one's habits. That's what means avyabhichari. Now this question, there are two questions which Arjuna asks. He says, what is the symptom of someone who's transcendental, and how do you become transcendental? So this is the answer to how to become transcendental. But Krishna also says, what are the symptoms of someone who's transcendental? So we should see if both of these things are here, because Krishna is saying, yes, unmotivated devotional service will bring one to the transcendental platform. Uninterrupted devotional service. And let's check if all the symptoms are there. All right, you ready? See, not some. See if you've got all of these symptoms. And when you have all the symptoms, then you have the symptoms of a transcendental Vaishnava. So Krishna says like this. I won't read the Sanskrit, but it's quite long. You can read it for yourself. He who does not hate illumination, attachment and delusion when they are present, or long for them when they disappear, who's unwavering and undisturbed through all the reactions of the modes, remaining neutral and transcendental, knowing that the modes alone are active, who's situated in the self and regards alike happiness and distress, who looks upon a lump of earth, a stone, and a piece of gold with an equal eye, who is equal towards the desirable and the undesirable, who is steady, situated equally well in praise and blame, honor and dishonor, who treats alike both friend and enemy, and who has renounced all material activities, such a person is said to have transcended the modes of material nature. So these are the characteristics, these are the qualities, these are what are known as the lakshana, by which you identify someone. And all of these qualities, not some, not 50%, 90%, but all of these qualities should be there. That's the qualities of someone who's transcendental. And that is achieved by practicing avyavacharya bhakti, uninterrupted devotional service. So against these two verses, we should actually check, and then we'll see whether we're actually really transcendental or not. And it's very important to go by qualifications. Everything you identify by qualification. How do you know what gold is? Because it has certain characteristics. How do you discriminate gold from lead, or an apple from an orange? It has a different color, a different shape, a different lakshana. So similarly, transcendentally situated people also have their lakshana. And these are the lakshanas that one should see. So we should see within ourselves whether these things are there. And then we'll know whether actually the standard of our devotional service is up to what Krishna says here. In fact, in the second chapter, Krishna already starts off by talking about what are the symptoms of someone who's transcendentally situated. And they're given in 55 to 68, 58. Not only there, but second chapter, 12th chapter, 5th chapter, 14th chapter, always talks about transcendental qualities. In fact, 20% of the entire Gita deals with qualities of transcendence, qualities of devotee. 20% Krishna is emphasizing so much. You have to recognize a thing by its qualities. Otherwise, it's called blind faith. And unless you know what are the qualities of someone transcendently situated, how can, for instance, you select someone as a guru who's transcendently situated? And you won't know, not just believe because someone else said something. That's called gossip or tradition at best. You should accept something for fact. And that is the responsibility of devotees. So we should be able to judge. I don't want to use the word judge by passing judgment on someone, but we should recognize ourselves and others according to symptoms, not according to belief or blind faith or hearsay or so on. And we should not think that just because we are practicing devotional service, that therefore we are automatically transcendental. Practicing devotee, practicing bhakti will bring us to the transcendental platform, but gradually. And how will we know that it's happening? Because these qualities will be developing. That is the system. And when all the qualities are manifest in someone else, in ourselves, then one can understand, yes, here is the basis for transcendence. So this is one point, and a very important point, because very, very often we're under this sort of misconception. Well, why does Prabhupada say that the devotees are therefore transcendental? Yes. But what does this word devotee mean? It's such a generic term. It's like a soldier. Who's a soldier? A private is a soldier, and a general is a soldier. Does that mean that a private and a general are equal, because both happen to be soldiers? So Shukadeva Goswami is a devotee, and we also get to use the word devotee. Does that make us and Shukadeva Goswami on the same platform? So all kinds of devotees, motivated devotees, intermediate devotees, pure devotees, Mahabhagavad devotees. In Srimad Bhagavatam, Parikshit Maharaj is called Mahabhagavato Maha, Mahabhagavad devotee. They're all called devotee, but doesn't mean that just because it's the same word that it's all one. So when Prabhupada says, yes, devotees are transcendental, it means pure devotees are transcendental. But that doesn't automatically make us transcendental just because we happen to be given the opportunity to become devotees, and we use that word. So in the same way you could say that, yes, soldiers are leaders of armies, but that doesn't make every soldier leader of army. It makes the captains and the colonels and the generals and the field marshals, they're the leaders. But it means that the privates are the ones who are following. So we should not be confused by terminology, because very often terminology has different definitions. Even the word pure devotee, Prabhupada uses in different ways. Sometimes he uses someone who's following the pure devotee as being a pure devotee. Sometimes he uses the word pure devotee as someone who has a pure motivation as a pure devotee. And someone who is actually completely pure of all anarthas, he's also a pure devotee. They are on completely different levels of devotional service. So we should be clear about these things and not just assume a position just on the basis of etymological usage, just how words are being used in a book. That word usage will not make us transcendental. Rather, we'll be fooling ourselves. The next question is, which comes first? Freedom from the modes of material nature or transcendence? This is another issue. And obviously, in the discussions up to now, we've sort of answered that, but I'd just like to get into it a little deeper. In other words, you sometimes think, yes, I'm practicing devotional service, I'm in this mode, and simply by practicing Krishna consciousness, I will automatically jump to the transcendental platform. Is that so? Can you go from ignorance to transcendence without going through all the intermediate stages? It's parallel to the first question, but it makes clear the sequence of advancement. So we come to Krishna consciousness in passion and ignorance, and we're all practicing devotional service. It is the common medicine that is given to all. But it's very clear that we're not automatically elevated to the transcendental platform. All we have to do is see the symptoms. Yesterday, we read that goodness is conducive to spiritual life. So, can one just automatically go from a position of passion and ignorance to transcendence without systematically shedding off the symptoms of the lower modes? In other words, without getting to goodness? And the answer is no. So let's see. Let's quote a few things. The proposition here is you have to systematically go. Ignorance, passion, and goodness. And in goodness, when you practice devotional service, that has maximum effect. And at that point, from goodness, you go to transcendence. Generally, the system is not to jump from a lower mode. You have to go through the mode of goodness in order to come to transcendence. And Krishna speaks to Uddhava in 25th chapter, Eta samsmrita punso guna karma nibandhana jhane me nirjita saumya guna jivina atmaja bhakti yogena ma nishto madbhavaya tapadyate. O gentle Uddhava, all these different phases of conditional life arise from work born of the modes of material nature. The living entity who conquers these modes, manifest from the mind, can dedicate himself to me by the process of devotional service and thus attain pure love for me. Here I just want to emphasize the sequence. Krishna says he conquers the modes and he can then dedicate himself by the process of devotion. In other words, Krishna, and attain pure love. In other words, the sequence is first conquer the modes, then practice pure devotional service, then achieve love for Krishna. In the third canto, Lord Kapila is saying also, a pure soul who is prepared to be freed from this material entanglement must first be freed from the association of the three modes of material nature. He says, if you want to be freed from material entanglement, first, in other words, you want to be transcendentally situated, first you have to be freed from the association modes of nature. And yesterday we were highlighting that you use the mode of goodness to achieve liberation from the modes of nature. And Srila Prabhupada in 1975 spoke in the following way. So, our endeavor should be to raise ourselves first to Sattva Guna. That we can do. And then transcend Sattva Guna and reach the spiritual platform. There are so many other goals. These are just some. So the sequence here is that one should raise oneself to goodness by practicing bhakti. And by continual practice in goodness, transcendence will be achieved. In goodness, we saw that knowledge and illumination, purification, are the symptoms. The karma that we have accrued in past lifetimes has its weight and effect on us. In passion and ignorance, you will accrue more karma. You can't avoid it, because you're not in full knowledge. In the mode of goodness, one knows. What did Krishna say? One whose senses, all one's senses are illuminated by knowledge. One knows how to act in such a way as not to incur karmic reaction. And because devotional service in goodness has maximum effect, very quickly the results of one's past karma diminish, and in that way one comes to the purified platform and raises on to the platform of transcendence. So we should therefore not think that simply following four regulated principles guarantees goodness. That's also a false idea. I'm following the four regulated principles, I'm in the mode of goodness. No. Following the four regulated principles means you're a human being. That's all. Four regulated principles are some of the symptoms of the mode of goodness, but not all. And this is something that we have to be aware of. That it's not sufficient that because we have some symptoms of something that we automatically entitled to the whole thing. It's just like being a millionaire. If you have 100 pounds, although 100 pounds is contained in a million pounds, doesn't make you a millionaire. So if you have 3 of X number of symptoms of the transcendentalist, you shouldn't automatically think you're transcendental. They should all be present. So these are some of the symptoms, but four regulated principles don't alone constitute Sattva Guna. So here the conclusion is that one should first free oneself from the influence of the modes of material nature, and then pure devotional service, pure bhakti will come. I'll go to the next point and then stop for a brief break. Here we talked about the sequence. First question was, are we transcendental? The second is, can one actually, which comes first? Whether one jumps directly to transcendence, or does one have to go to mode of goodness? And the answer was that before transcendence comes goodness. The question could be raised is whether it is possible to go from a lower mood to transcendence. Can you just go from ignorance and passion to the transcendental platform? Can you go from tamas to shuddha sattva? We gave the answer before. It's no. There are certainly exceptions to the rule. But the general rule is you go from tamas to rajas, from rajas to sattva, and from sattva to shuddha sattva. And this is the order of the modes and the process of advancement which is outlined in the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. I'll remind you, Bhaktivedanta Manor England, Tamasastu rajas sattva, sattva yad brahmadarshanam. There, Sutta Goswami says, firewood is a transformation of earth, but smoke is better than raw wood, and fire is still better, for by fire we can drive away the benefits of superior knowledge. Similarly, passion is better than ignorance, but goodness is best, because by goodness one can come to realize the absolute truth. At least if you know any part of this verse, this Brahma, Sattvam, Yad Brahmadarshana, that you should know. By goodness one comes to Brahmadarshana. Prabhupada similarly says in the purport, he says one has to rise to the platform of the mode of goodness so that one can be eligible for the devotional service of the Lord. This is the eligibility for pure devotion. You come to goodness. The answer then is, so only goodness makes one eligible to transcendence, not passion and ignorance. It is not tamas yad brahmadarshana, it is sattva yad brahmadarshana. From goodness you can take darshan of transcendence, but not from rajas and tamas. Prabhupada further says, but if there are impediments on the progressive path, anyone, even from the platform of tamas, can gradually rise to the sattva platform by the expert direction of the spiritual master. The expert spiritual master is competent to direct a disciple from any stage of life, tamas, rajas, or sattva. So once again, Prabhupada is repeating the same thing. He says that one goes from tamas, one can gradually rise to the sattva platform. No jumping. One is going gradually. He says gradually and systematically. And this is the duty or responsibility of the Guru. It isn't that the Guru automatically tries to force someone into the transcendental mode. It will generally not work. It will just end in unnecessary strain, endeavor, and ultimately it may cause fall down on the part of the disciple. So once again, lower modes are to be elevated to sattva, and from sattva one comes to the platform of transcendence. Now the next point is how to be elevated. And before we discuss that, we'll take a short break, 3-minute break. Everyone can just